So tomorrow you get to vote and as to who you want to be in government, right, in Ireland. And over the last decade, the majority, if not all, of the parties in the Dáil at the moment, right, or even just in the whole thing, right, in the whole political landscape, they have spent the last decade trying to stop you from drinking. So what you might think, but it's the principle of it, of limiting your ability to purchase certain things. They have limited your ability to attend the funerals of your loved ones. They have limited your ability to engage in society and promoted it, and wanting you banned from society for not following their ideas of how you should react to a given situation, right? Even though the suggestions that they put forward and implemented nearly in all cases against your will, right? Or against your agreement, really, against your preference, were false, right? And it was argued against. They were argued against at the time, and people who made those arguments against what the government was doing over the last few years, they got kicked off platforms, they got silenced, their jobs got threatened, right? The government supported all of this. They supported all of this. All these parties, opposition parties, whatever, even the parties that are not in government, they all supported this. They took away your right to freely travel. They wanted to take away your right to freely express yourself, right? They have overseen the aborting of up to 30,000 Irish babies. They also, the majority of them, voted against giving painkillers to the fetuses prior to them being aborted, right? These people have sold our natural resources out to big industries, right? They've welcomed in the world and they've housed the rest of the world before you, right? They force you to pay for the importation of all of these people when you don't want it, right? They're given medical cards ahead of you while you're means tested, right? On and on and on, right? The government has, these people in government have supported nearly everything that could be implemented to make the Irish people's lives more difficult than they need be, right? They've bailed out banks, they've covered up scandal after scandal after scandal, right? There's children going missing in this country at a scale that hasn't been seen in God knows how long, right? And none of them are held to account over it. None of them accept responsibility for it. They lie to you when they're confronted with this and say, "I didn't do that." This is crazy. But you can go and look it up and see, well, on this day you done that. You said this, right? So we've an opportunity to vote in a way that drastically reduces these people's influence and power and the effect they have on people in Irish society, right? And while some people might say, like, well, why are you voting? Voting is the big scam system. If voting changed anything, they wouldn't allow it. All that sort of stuff, right? I understand that, and that's very relevant when you're picturing an ideal, right? You're picturing an ideal society where there was no voting in people that just take total control over your life, right? That didn't exist because it wasn't permitted. People didn't accept that anymore, right? They were autonomous and made their own decisions and benefited their own neighbours and all that sort of stuff. And communities were solid and nourishing, self-nourishing, right? And self-perpetuating. But we don't live there, right? We don't live there at the moment. We live in a society where the next obstacle, the next opportunity to change, amend and fix and destroy some things that are negative in this culture, the next opportunity for that is voting, because that's what people have accepted as the next opportunity. Otherwise, people would have taken a different path. It would have just happened organically, right? But the bulk of people are not there to take a different path. They see voting as still legitimate. They see it as a preferred way of going about things, right? So up until the point where fate, if it's going to be, is totally destroyed in that system, you have to play the hands and the cards that you're dealt, right? And in our case, in this moment, it is voting tomorrow. So whatever decision you want to make around that, off you go, right? But know what you're voting for. know what you're looking at, and accept the responsibility of the consequences that comes from whoever you vote for. You should be willing to do that and put your hand up and say, got that one wrong, if that is the case, or yeah, do you know what, I think I got that right. Great. It's reflected in the person I voted for, her, and the party I voted for. So what happens after the vote? People are going to be disappointed because people naturally have unreal expectations of the situation that we find ourselves in, right? Or they're lacking probably a wider perspective of the situation we find ourselves in, right? So this isn't just a case of a couple of dodgy politicians sitting in the Dáil pulling the strings. Like, this is deep embedded, not just in the political infrastructure, but in terms of local councillors, uh, county councils, all that sort of stuff, right? The bureaucracy that's involved in it. These people have been involved in that system for probably most of their life. They don't know how to think any other way, right? A lot of them, and they will continue on thinking in a specific way up until the day they die, probably. Some people will change their minds along the way, right? But it's not just a case of voting out people who sustain the system for a period of time, because they all, each of these people have dependents, right? They've favours that have been done. They've people that are in their debt to a degree. So even if we do manage to vote in every single non government party or non-industry party and or person, right, candidate, you're still dealing with the bureaucracy that comes underneath that, right? So people that are working in the public sector, people that are working in the county councils, the guards, all that sort of stuff, the media, RTE, you're still left with all of that stuff, right? So it even if it was the best case scenario tomorrow, there's still a bit of the way to go towards fixing everything, right? Or turning things around in a preferred direction. So what do you do, right? Most likely you get there'll be a few people that get voted in tomorrow, and their voices then will be carried by the media, probably manipulated and soundbited and edited and stuff like that. But they'll be in the Dáil, right? And the Dáil is televised, right? So to a large degree, there will be no avoiding certain topics and certain perspectives being spoken of in the Dáil, right? And the truth is an addictive thing, right? Hearing alternatives even is a nourishing thing. It can put people off and ruin people's minds as well. But ultimately, we work best when we have more information around things, right? That's a given, right? The more you know about something, the better a decision you can make around the thing. So you begin to hear things and probably see things, right? And feel things, right? Because you'll counter to what you have in there now, you'll have people that are speaking from the heart. Or you don't see that much. Like, look, Simon Harris is the perfect example of this fella is just press play and spit out whatever it is that has been downloaded into his software, and right, whatever programming he has, he just vomits it out, and it's just silliness, right? You can't trust it. There's no feeling attached to it. There's no heart in it, right? And Irish people love that, right? We work well with that. We appreciate that. Being straight talking, right? And shooting from the hip sort of a thing. So you're going to see a bit of that. And that's going to, I can't guarantee what effect it'll have on people, but it'll have an effect, right? So even if it's just a handful of new TDs that get in there, there's going to be work done around that. There's going to be ripple effects that come from that. And what impact that has on Irish people is yet to be seen, but I can only imagine it'll be a positive one, right? You'll have the naysayers who'll go to their grave for the status quo, right? But you'll also have people who, upon hearing it on television, will see it as being given the stamp of approval as a legitimate perspective again, and it might have been one that they held all along, they just didn't want to be saying it, right? So we could see that, in which case that is a movement in a more positive direction, a direction aimed towards more knowledge, more information being shared from these systems and these offices that people still obviously hold in high regard, right? So if you're a TD, you seem to command a bit more respect than someone who is below you, right? And that's the perspective that a lot of Irish people have. And I think we'll start to see that being used now, right? Because the Spider-Man thing, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So when we see someone in a position of power, we automatically assume that they take responsibility. Whereas we've seen the politicians that are in there now, they don't. They televise debates. They go, I've nothing to do with that, really. I never done that kind of a thing, right? Now, you might start to see TDs accept a little bit more responsibility and speak in that fashion, right? And that's going to be nourishing for Irish people. So even if tomorrow doesn't go the way you wanted it to, take the positives out of it, right? And then give it a couple of months, give it a while, right? And just gauge how people are. Like, will it be the case that people will vote in certain people and then they'll just sit back and go, right, leave them do it? Or is the movement the direction of energy that you can feel from people, which is coming out in anger, right, and animosity and dislike of the status quo, and non-acceptance of a continuation of what's going on right now, right? Will we see that continue to grow? What does that look like? Do people then begin to get impatient with the new government when it's in there, right? Do they begin to make alternatives? Do they begin to think differently? Do they begin to think that there needs to be a different way of approaching that things? All yet to be seen. But we're kind of bound to the next step of these things, right? And seeing what reaction each step along the way has in each Irish person and the Irish people nearly as a whole, right? So in predicting things, probably difficult. No one can say for certainty, right? You can kind of estimate based on what you think you know about what you think you're seeing, but no one can guarantee anything, right? It's not going to be all doom and gloom, and it's not going to be all flat killed for the next 5 years either. Like, there's going to be a shift. It's already there, like, but you're going to see it represented now in the different layers of society on whole, right? And you can see it across Europe, where some of the more right-leaning parties are getting elected and winning. So their countries are a little bit ahead of us, and Ireland, as tends to be the case, right? Paddy last sort of a thing. We tend to be the last to adopt the change, or depending on what it is, we could even be the first, right? But there's a hesitancy in Irish people from looking like they're out of touch, right? We're not as modern as the rest of the continent, sort of a thing. So the stabilizers or the brakes have kind of been on Ireland for God knows how long. Like, when was the last time we could say that we had a population that was aimed at expressing itself as Irish people, right? Like moments like Riverdance, that sort of a thing. Like, when did we last have a moment like that? Moments like the France and World Cup football, where the Irish people were serenading a baby on the bus, that sort of a thing. Moments that we all looked at and said, yeah, that is us at our finest. That is us at our best, right? When was the last time we had moments like that? I could not tell you. All we've had is terrible representations of the worst parts of the Irish mind, right? Which is a total giving in to authority and accepting whatever it is that's dealt to you and telling other people not to complain about it and get on with it, sort of a thing, right? I think we're kind of done with that now. We've suffered enough, right? That the weight of the world has been on our backs for long enough, and it'd be sure nice to see a little flicker of Irish spirit, right? Whatever way that looks in the 21st century, it's an ever-changing thing, right? But it has its limits on it too, right? And those are the limits that we impose, and we decide we don't want that as people, right? So best of luck to everyone tomorrow, and to anyone who stood for election, fair play, and we continue on regardless, right? But it'd be nice to see a more imaginative future where Irish people viewed themselves as having something to offer other than their taxes to the EU, right? And I think that day is coming. I think it's already here for a lot of people, because that's the way they're living right now in the moment. But other people are a little bit unsure, and they want to see which way the land lies after this thing. So we will see, we will find out together, and we will push on towards a better future, I suppose.